If you're willing to come out of your political camp for just a minute and really want to understand what's going on with the migrant crisis, immigration, the southern border, then the Wall Street Journal just put out this article, which is absolutely fantastic. The explosion of asylum claims driving the global migrant crisis. Really goes through kind of exactly what's going on and why it's become very recently such a big problem. And then I want to take the opportunity to cover a couple other articles from Wall Street Journal that really goes into the economics of immigration and things like that, so that we can understand why this is so important to the U.S. economy. All right, let's first understand what's going on with this asylum process that has really become broken. This is the best summary of the entire article, which shows illegal encounters on the right. Shows why we've seen such a major spike in illegal encounters, but it's kind of shocking that, from 2010 to 2020, this problem was really not all that big of a deal, at least compared to previously. This graph actually comes from U.S. Customs and Border Patrol. I have done an entire video on this graph, which I will link at the end. This is a surprisingly good graph. But this is really the problem, right? So this is filed asylum cases, which can cover multiple people. So 1 million asylum cases over this time. So we had 2 million illegal crossings, 1 million of which are asylum seekers. And this can cover multiple people. So this could be 1.5, this could be 1.8. In fact, the article says that when someone shows up and surrenders to a Border Patrol agent, nowadays the agents don't even ask whether they're asylum seekers, because if there's a line of 1,000 people and the first 100 people in line said they're all there to file for asylum, you would stop asking, right? So this is virtually everyone that is illegally crossing the border is requesting asylum. So why is that happening? In a globalized world where virtually everyone has a cell phone in their hand these days, and they have social media, and traveling around the world is so much easier, it is only logical to assume that if people perceive that they have substantially better opportunities somewhere else, and there is a means by which they can get there, that they will do it. That's what I do. I suspect that's what you would do. And that's what all of these people that are coming and seeking asylum in the US. So how does seeking asylum in the US work? Oh, it's interesting. These 2 million people, half of them, over 50% of them are families, right? So of this 2 million, over 1 million of them are family units, kids, moms, dads, things along those lines. And 500,000 are not crossing illegally. They're crossing legally using the app that was rolled out in 2023 as part of immigration reform, where they effectively show up to the border and then they try and get an interview. But there's only so many interviews a day because the system can only handle so many people. There's problems with the app, but it has been largely successful. 500,000 people, last year alone, used it to try and enter legally through the same asylum process. So the asylum process, the problem that has presented itself is that if you show up to the border and say, I'm here for political asylum, whatever, I'm escaping some violence at home or something that's been happening in my family or persecution, then by law in the US, you must be let in and allowed to work until your asylum claim gets processed. But the problem is that, back in the 80s when the Refugee Act came out, we were only designed to handle about 50,000 claims a year. And now we're dealing with 2.5 million of them going through the thing. So there's just not enough capacity. So it takes a year, 3 years or more in order to process. This whole time you're working, technically legally in the country, even though you entered illegally, you're in the system now. But only 1 in 5, and that's recently, as these numbers get higher, this is probably going to go down. Only 1 in 5 people actually get asylum. Those people are allowed to work. I assume there's some path to citizenship for them. The other 4/5 of the people are not allowed to work, but they're not deported, right? It's too expensive to find them and to send them back on a plane. So we don't go through the effort, is effectively what the article says, in order to deport them. So they're just left in limbo in the US, which we're going to come back to when we talk about the economics. So is it being abused by the people coming? Absolutely, 100%. Have we failed to fix the system? Absolutely, 100%. This is what we need to address. Of course, we tried to pass legislation a couple of months ago. It's ultimately torpedoed for political reasons, which is devastating, but I won't get into political, kind of discourse in the video because I want to try and keep it clean of that. So So the asylum system is being abused and is largely broken. And we need to fix that. Right. Now let's talk about the actual impact of the immigration, because this article, uh, the job numbers aren't adding up. Immigration helps explain why. Talks about the jobs report. So when the jobs report comes out every month, there's really two parts to it, which is how many jobs did the economy create? And then what is the unemployment rate? How many people out there are still trying to find jobs but can't? The unemployment rate is famously 3.6 to 3.9, famously low, kind of shockingly low. That effectively just implies that there are people effectively in between jobs and things along those lines are looking for a better job. And yet, if there's not a lot of people looking for work, it's really hard for economy to create a lot of jobs. So if you're creating a lot of jobs at a low unemployment rate, it becomes a head scratcher, like, right? Like, how is the unemployment rate? How are there so few people looking for jobs, and yet we're able to add so many jobs to the economy? And this article really, kind of goes to show that it's because the population estimates that we're using are way off, because we have 1 million people immigrating through this asylum process every year, and thus the estimates of our population are off. So this is important to understand around a couple of different things around economics. The first is that there are two incorrect assumptions around immigration and employment. The one is that if someone comes and takes a job, that's a job that someone else doesn't get. That assumes that economics is a zero-sum game, and it's just simply not the case, right? As populations grow, their economies grow, there are more jobs. So if you bring more people to an area, demand for things go up, so you need more people to make those things, and generally the economy grows. The other one is that as immigrants come, and they are willing to work for less, and thus wages can go down across the board, and the workers that were already there are hurt by that. There's a very famous event after the Refugee Act in like 1980, 1982, where we started allowing asylum seekers to come in, and Fidel Castro said anyone in Cuba who wants to go to the US can do so now. And like 125,000 people immigrated to the US, and many of them settled directly in Miami. This all comes out of a book. There's a very famous study in the economic world, a number of studies actually. Good Economics for Hard Times is where I'm citing all of this. And economists realized that this was like a golden opportunity to understand rapid immigration to an area. So they went and studied the impact of wages and things on workers, and largely came to the assumption that not only did the economy grow rapidly during that time, but the wages of people who were already living in Miami generally either stayed the same or went up as they became managers, started their own businesses, things along those lines. Now, like everything in economics, just because it is good for the economy in general does not mean it is good for every single person in the economy. I'm not arguing that some people are not harmed by immigration, but that's a conversation for the role of governments and regulations and things along those lines. So in general, the economics around immigration is that it helps the economies, just like it is helping our economy right now add so many jobs and keep our unemployment rate so low. Now, the inflation around this is interesting, right? Because we just went through a big inflationary period. Inflation happens when demand outstrips capacity, right? And capacity is when the economy can't make anymore, right? You might think, well, demand outstrips supply. Supply just goes up to meet demand. But what if supply is at capacity and it can't make anymore? Then the economy wants to buy more things than it can make. And the only logical thing to happen for those is for the prices of those things to go up so that the demand comes down. That's what happens with inflation. And when you have 1 million people moving to the country every year and 4/5 of them are eventually told that they cannot work, they still have the demand. We do not have the workforce in order to produce the goods, and we reach capacity. No shocker, we are continuing to see inflationary impacts. All right, the next thing is demographics in the US. So I've done a number of videos, I'll link one of them here, around birth rates in the US and all around the world and how that affects the economy and the simple truth of it. Now, this is talking about urban areas. Immigration drove America's post-pandemic urban growth, but this chart has nothing to do with cities. Annual population change, this just shows births, deaths, and immigration, and it's showing that births are really not going up. Deaths are dipping, this is probably a COVID impact. If you look at deaths, COVID is so very obvious in it. And then immigration, you see this huge change in immigration, right? And yet we know the demographics and birth rates and the trends, which is all in that other video. We know that the US population is probably going to be leveling out here soon or dropping, certainly if it were not for immigration, possibly even with immigration. By like the 2040s, we may see a population decline, much like China is going through right now. And you may be of the mind, good, I don't want any more people in America or something along those lines, but it's terrible for the economy, is how I will summarize it, right? It is not good for the economy, which is very important to every single person, no matter what you want to accomplish. A good, healthy, robust economy is always priority one. So if you want to do something for the environment or whatever it is, without a good, strong, robust economy, there will be no support for it. So, all right, I promised another video here that is on immigration, where I really talk about kind of what's going on with the southern border, how Borders and Customs deals with immigration. This was, of course, a year ago, so we weren't talking about this asylum problem because that spike hadn't really happened yet, but it's a fantastic video. I hope this has been informative. I will talk to you soon. Thank you.